welcome to this bonus episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast, episode number 90 with Bill Zimmerman. Really appreciate this fun chat, very enlightening, and just a lot of great energy. Just hearing about Bill's perspective as he's come into the higher ed world in a teaching role, a faculty role, kind of moved his way up there and really has found such a great calling and kind of a great purpose working with his students and giving them relevant experiences through all his various kind of side projects and hobbies and stuff. So just really great fit. Just love hearing how, especially in Bill's instance, like anytime anyone's hobbies are really positively contributing to their life, and then in this instance, helping to really give meaningful experience to students as they are figuring out their career goals and everything. So really appreciate Bill's time here and all that he's shared. And without further ado, this is episode number 90 with Bill Zimmerman. Cool. Well, I think, we can go ahead and dive right in. And so we'll start out here as we always do. I really appreciate, you reaching out and making the time, being willing to hang out and talk about your journey and, everything else, we have on the docket here. But we'll start as we always do. If you wanted to give a brief introduction of who you are and your professional journey of how you got to be where you are today.
Yeah, no problem. My name is Bill Zimmerman. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Advertising and Public Relations in the Donald P. Bellisario College of Communications at Penn State. And yes, my journey to my current position as a faculty member was long and winding. But I will say, teaching has been the best job of my life by far. I've never felt more creatively alive. So I'm in a good space professionally right now. So it's really fun to talk about this sort of stuff. So professionally, things kind of started off going to Indiana University of Pennsylvania and getting a journalism degree there. I started after that working at the local newspaper right in that town for about almost 10 years, and then came to Penn State's University Park campus to work in their public relations office, mainly as an editor and writer for the Penn State News website, which was kind of this repository for all news related to the university, including news coming from our campuses across the state. Pretty quickly working at Penn State, this place gets in your blood. You bleed blue and white pretty quickly. You drink the Kool-Aid, whatever you want to call it. I really realized that working at a university was a pretty awesome gig. Being on a nice green campus and just being around so many people trying to better themselves. I love that energy. And one of the things that I did to try to keep that in my life was get a master's degree in higher education. And when I started that, my mission was really just to get a degree, a master's degree, but didn't really know how I was going to focus that. The Penn State has a very generous tuition discount for employees. I wanted to take advantage of it. So I got into the higher education program, a very practical graduate program, thinking, could go into advising, lobbying, could just become a better educated campus communicator. There were so many different ways, fundraising. There were all these different avenues that seemed attractive. And when I got in that program, I found it to be very flexible, and I was able to take it in different directions. And eventually I took it into, learning as much as I could about teaching at a college level. So as I continued to work in Penn State's Office of Strategic Communications, I eventually became their social media manager, using all of the various social media tools to help get out university messaging. And I also had the great opportunity to teach a journalism class as an adjunct. There's a class called News Writing and Reporting that almost all communication students need to take. So there's a lot of sections of that class to fill, and the college fills it often with working professionals or people at the university who had journalism experience. And when I taught that class, I really realized that teaching was the avenue that I wanted to take, that's where it's at. It started to feel a little bit like a calling, and I kind of made it my mission to get a full-time teaching position once I got my master's degree, and I almost tried to kind of speak it into existence. I would tell anyone who would listen that my mission was to teach in higher education, and so I got my degree in fall of 2016, and eventually was able to get a full-time position in the College of Communications, where I was teaching as an adjunct. And the rest is history. I've been teaching now full time since fall of 2017, and it's been an absolute blast.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess it's interesting. You kind of coming up, I think, because I think the sort of sad truth is, I guess that's coming to mind, is like a lot of people who become faculty at institutions don't have the sort of level of sort of formal teaching about teaching. Like they just are like, oh, I know so much about this thing. Obviously I can, kind of distill that knowledge to other people, but I think they can certainly get a lot better over time. But the fact that you kind of, perhaps came in with a little bit more of a student-centered point of view through your master's, but just seeing that like, the teaching role was what called out to you more so than some of those other things that you mentioned. So yeah, that was just like really fascinating, because I guess I'll kind of jump around questions a little bit, because this seems
Yeah, that's
like
fine.
it kind of makes the most sense of like, so this experience that you've had teaching, like what has been like the most exciting and kind of engaging part of that for you, since it, certainly was not what you thought, I guess you were doing, or you might be doing initially, or, you do the alumni relations or fundraising, like those sort of
Yeah.
things, like teaching would seem quite different than that. But what has been so like meaning for you for, through that experience?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, I feel like I'm a much better instructor thanks to the professional experiences that I've had, and also because of that professional life that I had had before becoming a teacher, it was really important for me to keep learning. And as the old adage goes, those who can't teach. And I did not want that to apply to me. I didn't want to seem disconnected from what was happening in the professional world. So it was kind of a mission of mine to keep learning, keep staying active. I launched my own podcast, that during that, I think during my second semester of teaching, because I wanted to set an example for my students of trying new things, of, making content. And I wanted to be able to draw from experiences like that to bring into the classroom as well. And teaching can certainly be tough. Lots of challenges. It can be an emotional roller coaster. There are days that you feel like you are a super teacher and you just leave the classroom walking on air, and there are other days you feel like a fraud, and you're a million years old, and there's no way you're ever going to connect with today's college students.
Mhm.
So there are ups and downs, and I say you should never get too high and you should never get too low in the job. But I think for me it was just there's excitement of dealing with college students. Now, obviously, they have had challenges in their lives, but I do like to say that they haven't been punched in the face quite yet by life. And what I mean is, professional disappointments and things that really kind of erode our confidence. So they still seem optimistic and excited about what the future holds, and there's something great about being around so many people like that. So I
Mhm.
liked drawing off that energy. I like how dynamic the communications field can be. There's always things happening. It doesn't feel stale. I do not have to work very hard to help my students realize that what we are doing has real world implications. This is not one of those classes where students are saying, when am I going to ever use this? I teach a class called Digital PR. It talks a lot about social media and emerging technologies. Taught a PR writing course, social media strategies course. I'm going to do a freshman seminar course in the fall on the power of podcasting. So I'm able
Hmm.
to be very current, be able to include a lot of real world case studies, bringing in guest speakers who are in the trenches. So I think that's one of the great things. I'm fortunate enough to teach in a college that really puts a value on having faculty with practical experiences that they can draw from, and I'm teaching in a field that's just so dynamic, always changing, and is really exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And yeah, I mean, kudos for being able to, yeah, have sort of the, the ability to teach that seminar on podcasting. That's really exciting, because it's obviously
Yeah, I'm
it's
so
such an
pumped for
interesting
that.
place.
Yeah,
Yeah, like
yeah,
it's an industry that's at this point of like maturity. So I think it's having that discourse around it of like how it's grown over time and sort of where it's at now, where it's going. Because it's like it makes me think too of just like other like industries that have been like booming, but they're hitting like an interesting point of maturity of like craft beer. Like that's it's like so established now, but it's
yeah.
also like in a weird transition, because it's like kind of saturated. And say podcasts are kind of the same. Like there's so many podcasts, so it's like, how do you differentiate yourself? How do you monetize? Like just how that's kind of evolved and matured. And Yeah, certainly more than enough to fill, first year seminar course. That's super exciting
Yeah,
for
very
you and
fertile
for the
ground.
students.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess then that kind of transitions well to kind of the other question of like sort of your own college experience. And I guess we can kind of expand it to like, your practical professional experience that you're bringing into the classroom, like your experience in journalism and everything. So I guess if you want to talk a little bit more about that, of like any of like sort of the anecdotes that you bring, or just maybe any like professional mentors or connections, like what did your sort of college experience and your sort of experience before you became kind of really invested and enveloped in teaching in the higher ed world, like what do you feel like that still kind of gives you, since like certainly you're teaching about it, but I know some folks it's like, you majored in something as undergrad, but then you kind of pivoted and it's like, yeah, what am I doing with my, history degree or whatever, like it could be perceived as like, you know, not relevant, but I'm guess like what comes to mind for you in terms of like your college experience, early professional experiences, what's still salient to you today?
Yeah, sure. In talking about going to undergrad, it's something I look back with mixed feelings sometimes. I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania. It's a state school and in Western Pennsylvania, about 14,000 students. And for me, where I grew up, if you went to college, you either went to IUP or you went to University of Pittsburgh at Johnstown. Pretty much those were the two.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of speaking generalities there, but for the most part. So for me, going to that school was very much kind of a 13th grade experience. And I also commuted my first 2 years. I lived with my parents, and I wish I would have done those things differently. I think I kind of stunted my own personal growth by just living at home for those first 2 years, and I wish I really pushed myself more. And then maybe even pursued a college, out of away from my hometown or out of state or whatever, and even though IUP was a fine school, I do wish that I had pushed myself a little bit more, because I think it would have come out of college with better confidence and more experiences that could kind of shape my worldview and my own confidence in myself and what I could accomplish. But during my time at IUP, I was lucky enough to come in contact with some fantastic faculty members, and this is what good faculty do. They help students see themselves in ways that maybe they never thought of themselves. And for me, that was faculty members like John Ellerbach, Bernie Ankney, and uh, Randy Jessic, who guys that would say, hey, I could actually see you teaching this someday. And it's like, wow, really, me, and then somebody saying, well, you're going to be something someday. And that sort of thing was amazing to hear, because I was a first generation college student, so I didn't really come to school with brimming with confidence or brimming with optimism about what the future was holding. I just kind of felt like I got good grades in high school, and then what's expected of me is to go to IUP,
Mm-hmm.
and so having faculty members who could really start to kind of twist my way of thinking a little bit, and actually getting me thinking about, wow, there's some certain things I could do in the future that could be pretty big. So for me, that was fantastic, and I'm really thankful for that. Although sometimes I do wish I just would have challenged myself in more ways to be more uncomfortable, during those formative years. In my first job as a newspaper reporter, as you can imagine, working at a newspaper starting in 2003, it was not a good time for the news business. It was, very low pay, not very good prospects for advancement, but it was an excellent job in getting me to learn a little about a lot of things. And it also made me a better writer. It made me a morning person. This was an afternoon newspaper, so I was starting at 5:15 a.m. For several
Wow.
years as the wire editor, looking for wire copy to fill in the gaps in our newspaper. So that made me a person who could get up, be excited to greet the day. That carried over when I came to Penn State, and I would get up at 5:30 and do my graduate school work in the morning before work. So it did help me develop some good habits. And I think I'm really realizing just how important those writing skills were, and just how I still enjoy when an idea comes to sit down and try to write a blog post, putting those skills to writing a good podcast episode description or writing better social media posts. I'm still trying to in my classes stress the importance of good writing.
Because yeah, I mean, there's so many, yeah, like avenues like that of just sort of like where you're going to be utilizing it. So certainly still important, even though some folks probably would be like, oh, it's not as important. It's like, no, yeah. I mean, like write a good copy, on a website, on a blog, any of these things, if you're trying to like, especially compel somebody to take some sort of action or, get somebody to make a download of your show and that sort of thing. Definitely very important.
Yeah, exactly. And just writing a good memo to your boss. There's so
Mm-hmm.
much power
Mm-hmm.
there when if you can do a good job of articulating your idea, then maybe that's you get to try something new because you stated it so well.
Yeah. Well, and it's also just like good, I think, for anybody, if you sort of, be really like reflective on your own experience of, acknowledging the positives, but also like knowing like, well, if I were to do it differently, would have tried these other things. Like, cause I think you can, I guess just have a very like leveled kind of point of view, when you're talking with somebody about, their options and that sort of thing. Like you'd be like, well, I did it this way and that was like, fine or whatever, like you kind of are sort of, I don't know, you kind of have tunnel vision, but you're at least just like aware enough and reflective enough about your experience to understand like, the way you did it is not the way that everybody else has to do it or, the only way, and those sort of things. So it just feels, yeah, it's always good to kind of reflect in that way. And,
Exactly.
yeah, recognize all those positives. Yeah. Like, the experience that you did have, not just, because I guess the inverse of that too would be like just like overly focusing on like what you didn't have and kind of uh, just like sitting with that, like it would just sort of like cause like frustration or something. But
Yeah, it's so easy to look back and be like, I wish I would have done this. And it's something I've been trying to do more is look back and think, boy, I'm happy I did that, during that time.
uh-huh.
Or boy, I'm really fortunate that I took this step or I talked to this person. So I'm trying to kind of reframe the way I look back on things.
Yeah, and just like make the most of what you have, kind of thing. It's
Exactly.
definitely a good adage there. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned like you've been working on your own podcast and really sort of like thinking of ideas and things to share. So this is kind of like the very open ended, big question, however you want to take it. But just like, what are you geeking out about right now? If it's stuff related to digital communications or your podcast or other just general hobbies and stuff that you have that you're interested in. What are the things that are grabbing your attention right now?
Yeah, I could definitely go long on this, and yeah, I love the title for this, and I was just thinking really the other day that in today's day and age, if you are not getting really geeky about something, if you aren't going really deep into some kind of arcane or just weird
Right.
hobby, you're really missing out because in the digital age, it's so easy to find your tribe, to find podcasts and YouTube videos and blog posts that just kind of uh, fill that need and scratch that itch. Yeah, get geeky about something. And for me, there's there are lots of things. The podcast is something I'm really excited about. It's called Happy Valley Hustle, and I tell stories of entrepreneurship and side hustlers and people who are using the digital age to work for them. And really, what that's all about is just I get really geeky hearing about stories of how people are blazing their own path. Right now, there are options that the digital age affords us. The chance that you may not get rich becoming a YouTuber, but maybe you scratch some creative itch, and maybe eventually that becomes something that maybe makes a little bit of ad revenue, and that's vacation money there, or whatever. That there
Mhm.
are ways for us to be creative and make stuff. So I never get tired of hearing stories of how people are kind of taking their ideas and making them a reality, whether that's risking it all and starting their own business or just doing a side hustle in a few hours in the evening when their kids go to bed. I love hearing those stories. I love, because they fill me with excitement and optimism that I can always keep trying new things, that there's always these sidelines that I can explore, and that life can be dynamic and exciting. So that's the big one, right there. And also, there's some of my weird things that I'm into. I like professional wrestling. That is a
Mm.
guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's fascinating. I love the behind the scenes intrigue. I get a kick out of the storylines that have come out on television. And you talk about something where you can go tremendously deep on that. There are some of the most popular podcasts right now are professional wrestling podcasts. There are YouTube channels, there are streaming channels, and there are books right now, biographies. And so that's just an example of how one subculture that you can just go so deep into it and become such a geek about it. And I think that sort of thing is so much fun. I'm an avid thrifter, love going to thrift stores, love going to yard sales, garage
Very
sales.
cool.
I actually sell stuff on Etsy. I call it Cool School Vintage, and I have an Instagram for that too. So that's again getting those kind of reps in doing this sort of thing, trying to promote things on social media. I'm not building an insanely large and engaged audience, but I'm doing this stuff. I'm doing the things that I talk about in class. So for me, that's really exciting. I'm pushing 40, so as I get older, I get more and more nostalgic. So for me, it's fun to find some of these clothes and shoes that I wish I had as a kid, and to find stuff and sell it to people and help them get that little rush of nostalgia. That I call it wrapping themselves up in the warm embrace of nostalgia. I like
Mm.
doing that sort of thing. So yeah, my big message today is just go geeky into something. Don't be worried about any stares that you may get, because when you find those people who also share your geeky interests, it can be really exciting and enlivening.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and I think kind of what you're alluding to, I guess, a little bit too, is like some of these things are, genuinely, what you're genuinely interested in, but also kind of give you an excuse to like play around with these tools and stuff, which you would then be able to like, teach about it better and those sort of things. Like I'll
Yeah.
tend to kind of do that sometimes as well, of like, stuff with like, yeah, social media or, like blog writing or podcasting, whatever. I'm just like, playing around with the tooling to be like, yeah, I know, like there's this thing that does this, and and it's just like an excuse to learn a little bit more about it. But
Sets such a good example of just like you can dabble in things. You're not going to break anything, dabble in it. If it's not for you, that's okay. But yeah, keep trying new things, keep trying new platforms, be willing to fail at things, or, be crappy at something at first. I think there's a lot to learn from those experiences.
well, and I think too, like, because I do sort of align myself with the kind of divergence of like being geeky or nerdy, and the idea of being geeky, which I think that we share, is this sort of like you kind of dabble, like, to use that word, like in a lot of different things, versus like being nerdy, where it's like, oh, I'm all in on like one thing and I know everything about it, versus like, yeah, I'll read up or like watch something or read something about something that's completely new to me and get a little baseline knowledge. So like if I'm having a conversation, I might be able to kind of just have a little bit of context and then just like be genuinely interested in learning more if somebody is, especially if they're really excited about it and just wanting to kind of, reciprocate that energy and that sort of thing. But yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, with like yeah, professional wrestling, because it's like that still is going on. It's been going on for so long, and that yeah, like there's like so much lore around it now of like the behind the scenes stories, or just sort of how it all gets made. But
Yeah, it's funny. People be like, "Yeah, professional wrestling, like Hulk Hogan," and it's like, yeah, that was in the '80s, and it just shows you that there can be these. It's so amazing now in our digital age. There can be these subcultures with rabid followings that are just totally off your radar, and I think we see that now with influencers and content creators who have millions and millions of subscribers, and large parts of the population have never even heard of this person. So it's fascinating now
mhm.
that where in the past you would have had to maybe have a hit movie or a platinum selling album, to become a celebrity. Now that's not the only way. And I think it's interesting too today when you're speaking to being geeky, you're seeing more and more more and more studies talking about the power of being a generalist. And how there's times where maybe it would be the knock was jack of all trades, master of none. Now we're seeing with the amount of technology and different tools that are at our fingertips, that there's power in dabbling and having a little bit of a skill in a lot of different things.
Because yeah, I mean, like so much is changing. So I think if you overly kind of invest or specialize in like one thing, it could end up being less relevant or less useful, or that sort of thing. Like, but yeah, like it just, I don't know. I'm sure it's still kind of probably competing schools of thought on that, but I definitely agree. Like being somewhat generalist, like being able to, uh, leverage different skills and experiences and stuff is helpful. But because I guess like in that, just still talking about kind of your different hobbies and stuff here, like with podcasting, I'm curious because like it's definitely something like I talk to a lot of people about it all the time of like starting their own shows and that sort of thing. And like, there's definitely a way to do it. Like you're talking about with like, your Instagram and Etsy and, if you're jumping on YouTube or something, like you can get into that like pretty, like it's low threshold. Like they certainly want to encourage as many people to create content as possible for the platforms and stuff. And, if you're just investing in it minimally, anything you get out of it, that's just kind of pure, profit. So like kind of balancing that of not going too, I guess, specialized, not like don't going too all in on one thing and expecting to, like be a millionaire. Cause like that happens with the blog and the podcast, I will sometimes just get, some support and even just a little bit like keeps the lights on, gets a little bit more money in my pocket. Yeah. Like vacation money, coffee money, whatever, but like for you with podcasts, like did you have any experience like getting into audio and stuff before you did that? Like what interested you in doing that in particular?
I did college radio a little bit and had fun with that. Had a hip hop show called The Underground that I got to do. That was a good time. But really, what kind of got me into the podcasting was, as a journalist, I enjoyed interviewing people one on one. I'm not a social butterfly. I'm not great in group conversations, but I feel like if you sit me down with someone, I can establish a rapport pretty quickly. So I felt like a podcast was a way to continue that. So that's what really drew me to doing a podcast. And there's a lot of power in doing it. And I tell anyone that's kind of thinking about this is you may have to recalibrate your idea of what success is. I think on the surface level, we think it's going to be getting an incredible building a big listenership, maybe getting sponsorship opportunities. And if you measure success in podcasting in those two ways, you're probably going to be disappointed pretty quickly, be demoralized. And I've been doing this for 2.5 years now, and I'm still, I still take blows to my ego when a show doesn't get as many listens as I think it should, or when a guest doesn't share an appearance on their own social media platforms. But for me, the measurement of success has been opportunities, the opportunities to talk to cool people, to get to talk to cool people like you, to get to put a spotlight on the cool people I already know, and give them a platform through my own podcast. So I'm constantly learning. And this has also created opportunities, as word gets out that Bill Zimmerman in the College of Communications does a podcast. I get invited to talk to classes, get invited to moderate and talk to and lead discussions at events that we do, like Startup Week and Global Entrepreneurship Week. So in that regard, this has been a tremendous success from a personal branding standpoint, and for in regards to me learning from a lot of other people. And it's like you're talking about, I'm getting experience in things like trying to build an email list. Maybe that becomes an email marketing list in the future. If I think of selling some sort of course or ebook or something like that. So I'm getting experience doing that sort of thing. I'm promoting these episodes through various social media platforms. I'm getting a working knowledge of some audio editing platforms and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think just like anyone who wants to set out and be a content creator, think more broadly about what is meant by success.
Absolutely. Because I think like you have to have that compelling reason that you're doing it for yourself to kind of fall in love with the process and keep doing, because if you are like chasing, dollar signs and all that, like purely like that is the only thing that you care about out of doing some sort of content creation, then, you're going to hit those frustrating points and just be like, oh, what's the point? I'm just going to, give it up. But yeah, it's like, similarly, yeah, it's like I just love having good conversations. It builds my conversational skills, and I learn something from the episodes, so I know other people do. And just like, yeah, putting yourself out there, distinguishing yourself, because like, yeah, nowadays it's like at least probably like once a month or something, someone's just like, hey, like, can I ask you a question about podcasting or whatever, just these random people who like find me on LinkedIn or somewhere. So it's just really nice that like I can give other people the benefit of my experience and knowledge to help them on this journey of, putting themselves out there and that sort of thing. And so really interesting.
Great message there. Contact content creators. They are happy to talk about this sort of thing. And like you said, yeah, it's very gratifying when somebody asks for my advice on something. Had several, sit down, over coffee talking about this sort of thing. I just emailed Jordan Harbinger the other day, a very popular podcaster, and he got back to me, and I was like, this is amazing. Just asking him a question about something. And so yeah, if you have content creators that you really like, you enjoy their stuff, reach out to them, tell them how much you appreciate it, and ask them questions. I'm sure they will help you out because they have all dealt with those frustrations that you're probably dealing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, those have been like cool moments of like the reach guests that I've had on my show, and like I feel like, uh, yeah, it's like just 30 minutes of someone time, to record. Like it's a pretty easy ask, like it's not a whole lot of their time, and if you yeah, just doing the right way, and that that can just be something you kind of get better at over time. But yeah, those have been some pretty cool moments. But so I guess then, I think you've kind of alluded to some of the things that, that you've kind of been maybe like listening to and all that, but always just like hearing from people, sort of the quote unquote, maybe like homework afterwards, some recommended listening and, reading and all that kind of good stuff. So anything that you'd want to give a tip of the hat to that you are reading, watching, listening to that we can put down in the show notes.
Yeah, I'm gonna approach this with the same kind of split that I do with my personal reading. I usually have one book that's professionally focused, self-help, business, that sort of thing, and another one that's more for strictly enjoyment. So I'll start up with the more professionally focused ones. I'm a big fan of Donald Miller, who created this kind of the story brand empire of his. He has a really great podcast, Building a Story Brand, and also I just read the book that he had written a few years back on that, and he's just he makes is his slogan is marketing made simple, and I just really like his vibe. It's something that any entrepreneur or someone trying to establish their personal brand can grasp. The idea, is that in the customer story, you are not the hero, you are the guide, allowing them to be the hero. So it's really kind of a new way of thinking about advertising, marketing, public relations. So his stuff really, really connects with me. So and I see my summers for me is about being a student. So I'm reading his stuff, I'm listening to his podcasts, I'm reading all the books I can find about social media marketing, about podcasting. So that's really kind of where my mind is at there. And when it comes to escapism, professional wrestling, going back to that, reading biographies, you wouldn't imagine the crazy lives that these wrestlers have lived. And along with that, Vice just had a fantastic documentary series called Dark Side of the Ring, that just wrapped up recently. That was just fantastic. And I will say, you do not have to be a professional wrestling wacko like me to enjoy it. And I'm also a big fan of this podcast called Crime in Sports, that's led by two comedians out of Arizona, telling stories of criminal athletes. It's just another just really fun listen. So my advice to everyone: have some balance there, because you don't want to always be living in that space of taking others' advice and assuming that there's all these things that you have to fix about yourself. So I think it's nice to keep improving, but also, please take a break from it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's really like there's just so much great content out there. So like keeping a pretty diverse diet of, I'll listen to like some news podcast, watch a documentary, but then also just have like, rewatch of an old favorite, like some old show or something.
Yeah. Watch several episodes of The Office and end your day.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
But then, yeah, like getting into new like sci-fi or like, some other random thing. And like I play a lot of video games, so they're kind of telling their own story and, that sort of thing. So, yeah, good to keep that balance.
Yeah, get lost in something sometime. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because I think certainly now, like we're kind of getting the fire hose of like news that's happening. Like there's always something new to be talking about and all that. So it's like do a little bit of that, a little bit of like maybe like business self help, which I partake in that a bit, and then just the pure escapism. I think that's a good little formula there. But as we wrap up, I mean, I always like to end things on an optimistic note. Certainly, we could use a little bit of that right now, of just like what you're optimistic about for yourself, like your job, life, and or the world. Kind of however you want to take this, of what you're looking forward to that you'd want to share.
Yeah, and I think one thing is right now it's trying to be okay with kind of feeling both a mix of optimism and dread right now about things, and I think that's it's I think we're all kind of going back and forth there. But I think what ultimately makes me optimistic is that where we're seeing examples of these challenges bringing out creativity in people, and my hope is that the conversations we're having will bring more equitable systems out there. So my hope is that we're seeing more and more people finding their voice, and especially younger people, and I think that means that they're going to be probably more confident and more effective working professionals. I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think it's just so exciting to just keep seeing the content creation opportunities, the things that people can do to launch side hustles, to just be a little, that we can introduce entrepreneurship in our lives in just tiny bits. And just how exciting and empowering it can be doing that. So, technology will continue to come out and give us opportunities. I think is super exciting. My students, make me hopeful. They're doing a lot of cool things. They've done, have overcome challenges. They have the right attitude. And they're incredibly ambitious. In my day, it was great if you did an internship, before your senior year, and now students are doing internships, practically every summer. So their grind is really inspiring. And I was thinking the other day, if I'm not jealous of my students' jobs and internships, then I'm doing something wrong. And I'm constantly jealous of the opportunities that they're getting in the professional world, the big jobs that I, with big media companies and stuff that I would have loved to have gotten out of college, but didn't really know how to get there. So the students, the vision that they're showing at this age is very exciting too. Students who know exactly, I want to work for this company, and I'm going to get this internship and do this, and I'm going to talk to this person, and I'm going to make it happen. And when you see people execute a vision like that, it's really inspiring.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because I think so much. Like there's so much opportunity out there, like when you're a student, to sort of have an excuse to be like, hey, I want to like be, an intern. And, a lot of companies have like established programs, but sometimes it's like, yeah, I mean, you got some stuff that you can help out around, with around here and sort of just observe and, meet with people and that sort of thing. So, it is fascinating to see how like, it's like, no, yeah, you got to do that like every year and maybe like with the same company every summer or different ones. And, you have a lot of diverse experiences and stuff like that. But, yeah, it's such a weird time because, yeah, like you said, like equal parts dread and optimism. Like I'm just a, habitual optimist. So, I try to kind of take solace in the fact of, as bad as things are right now, there are those people committed to working to make it better. So, doing what I can to amplify their voices and, support their organizations and those sort of things. So, because, it's just, it'd be easy to kind of get sucked into that, the black hole of dread and just sort of like, rolling your eyes so much they get stuck in the back of your head because it's just like, I cannot believe that this is happening. Like it's like, okay, yes, feel that because like don't normalize it, but also like try to kind of find the silver linings and take the energy that you have to work in whatever way that you can, like use what you have, whatever way that you can, and those sort of things. So,
yeah, and it's it just reminds me too, that they've just there's so many opportunities available to students, and I'm trying to always open their eyes to that sort of thing. And, that, and one of those is, meet with your professors, meet with some professor that you never even had for a class. You would be surprised how willing people are at the university level to sit down with you and talk to you, whether that's career advice or if you're, feeling that, frustration, that fearfulness maybe of things in the job market and that sort of stuff. The vast majority of us are happy to sit down with you and talk. And I just, my message would be with any student, to any students who are listening, there's so many opportunities in school. Take advantage of it. At Penn State, students have access to the Adobe Creative Suite. They have access to entrepreneurial assistance. We have a business accelerator called the Launchbox. A student could go there and take their idea and get, if they're accepted into the program, they could get $3,000 to help with customer discovery and could get mentored by entrepreneurs. So really, students need to, if you start opening your eyes and take advantage of some of these opportunities, and talk it out with your faculty members, things are going to look up and seem, and you're going to feel more optimistic about the future and feel more prepared to accept any challenges that may come down the road.
Absolutely. And I'll put a cherry on top of that of just also like, because I know it's been really helpful for me, like, or, it was when, especially when I was like an undergrad student of like, if you are that like higher ed professional or faculty, like also on the other side, like try to like nudge people and be like, hey, this, this could be really good for you. And that's sort of like encouragement. Cause I think like
Yes.
on both sides, like be open to welcoming it if a student is coming to you to like help be that mentor, but also like, yeah, give the little nudge, give the little like tap on the shoulder, the students like, they're not even aware. And you're like, hey, take a look at this. This could be really good for you. And they're like, oh my God, like, do you think this would be good for me? And it's like, yeah, like go for it. Like, I feel like,
yeah, I love those moments when you can share an internship, or just a blog post or an online training and say, hey, you may want to check this out.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and all that you shared, and we'll have ways to connect with you and all the work that you're doing and all the great stuff that you mentioned down in the show notes as usual. But yeah, thanks again so much for reaching out and connecting and for hanging out for the show.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dustin. And yeah, keep celebrating this geeky lifestyle because for me, it's really about approaching life with enthusiasm, being interesting, and being inquisitive. So I think you're doing great stuff.
Oh, thank you so much. Yes, I will. I will never stop. That is who I am.
Yes, keep being geeky.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the podcast. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Higher Ed Geek Podcast.